Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this interior project Glastron, it's time to talk about new gauges, reinstalling the windshield on this boat, and taking care of the bow rider seats. All right, so in the last entry, we were doing a lot of interior work, and I had a couple pieces left that I wanted to show in this video to kick things off, and that is the rear trim piece where the splash well is. There is a little piece that I polished up, then fastened back to the fiberglass, and I also put on the side bimini top rails. Now this is for the structure that actually came with the boat, so I'm putting these original pieces back on. All right, with these three pieces reinstalled in the boat, it was time to move on to the bow rider seats. Now, I did not build these from scratch on my own. I did, however, cut out the new bases for the seats out of marine grade plywood, and then I took them to a local upholstery shop here where I live. Talked to the guy over the phone before meeting up with him and just kind of telling him what I was looking for. And I told him I had already purchased marine grade vinyl. I told him I did not have the foam padding. I wanted to get that replaced, so that would be something he was providing. But I also bought the pipe that runs around the seat. So my plan was I wanted him to have a flat top, piping that goes around it, and then I wanted the sides sewn together. That's the big key word right there, sewn together. I do not have a sewing machine, so for me it was time to sub something out. Then once these were back in my hands, all I had to do at this point was attach the wood rail on the bottom half of these two seats so that they would actually stay in place. Now, one thing that I was unsure about was the seats themselves. I had unoriginal seats. Somebody had actually upholstered the seats that were in this boat when I bought it, and that was not the original material. So with that being said, I saw how they were put in place, but I wasn't really sure if that's how they were supposed to be or not. Well, I found a guy online who was parting out this exact model of Glastron. It was a 73 V-156. And lo and behold, he actually had original seats that he was getting rid of. I didn't need them because I was already working on, at the time when I found the pictures of this guy that he had posted online, I had already found my guy and had already taken my seat bases and have them recovered. But what I was able to do was get him to send me detailed pictures of the bottom half of those seat bases. And that's exactly how I'm rebuilding them. Come to find out, the way mine were rebuilt to begin with was pretty close. So the only thing I had to do now was attach 2x2s that I had coated with fiberglass resin, and what I did, figuring out where those pieces actually needed to rest. I cut these two pieces to length to fit exactly where they needed to be. Next thing, I'm attaching them with some stainless steel fasteners, and these things are ready to pop in place, and here is the finished product. I'm pretty ecstatic with how these things look in the boat. I just can't explain how good it felt to get essentially one half the boat is now complete. All right, so with the bow rider section complete, it was time to come back and work on the gauges. Now, I did not want to put in the original gauges that I removed from the boat. A few reasons. Number one, they were just trashed. They were really faded. They didn't look good. There was a lot of pitting on the metal itself, and I just did not want to put those old gauges back in this boat. Something I learned pretty quick was these were flush, non-through hole mounted gauges, which obviously I knew by looking at it, but I didn't realize how big of a problem it was to find replacements if you were trying to find the same thing. Something that's mounted flush or on top of the surface versus being cut and dropped into place, that's something that's kind of hard to come by. Only thing I could find were vintage replacements similar to what I took out of the boat, but I didn't want to do that. So the next thing I was doing was I got on the hunt for some through hole gauges. Now what I went with, these Faria stainless steel Chesapeake Bay I think is the type, and they were white face with blue accent. These light up white in color whenever the navigation lights are turned on. So I was pretty happy with the styling of this. I got the biggest ones that I could, and I got a kit. So this came with a fuel gauge, tachometer, voltmeter, speedometer. That's the 4 gauges that came in this kit together. Pretty happy with it. So got these in, and you can punch out the cardboard as a template. So there's some circular discs that you can punch out and use those to kind of figure out how you need to maneuver the gauges before you go drilling or cutting holes out of your hull. So that was pretty nice. With the masking tape laid out on the gauge panel, it was time to trace where I was going to be cutting the holes with a hole saw. I want to rewind just for a minute and explain something about the tape itself. I did 2 layers of tape so that when you go to cut through the hole itself, that fiberglass and that gel coat, trying to prevent cracking or messing up that paint slash fiberglass itself, just to make sure that didn't get mangled up here. I did 2 layers to try to salvage and make sure that I got a good clean cut. You can also try to reverse the bit first so that those teeth aren't really cutting down through, but rather kind of scribing first. Make your mark and then take it to the other direction and you can drill through. Another thing to bring up was that the original gauges, again, they sat flush on top of the hole itself. They were not through gauges. That's again why I'm having to cut through here. Those gauges had screw holes left behind on this panel. My painter did not fill those holes and he left them. We had discussed a few things about little odds and ends, and we had talked about the panel, but he did not clarify with me that I was needing those filled in. I didn't tell him I was going to put different gauges in here. Just didn't have that discussion. So I'm not blaming him. I'm taking the fall for that one. So again, I've got a little bit of a problem here before I even drill my holes. Trying to maneuver these gauges to get them lined out the best I can, but mainly what I'm doing while doing this is I'm trying to get a line to figure out where to put the voltmeter in the middle. The speedometer and tachometer, I'm almost kind of locked in to where they need to go before I even drill the holes, because there are 3 screw holes that went around the original gauges, 3 on each gauge. And those screw holes are just right in the range of those holes that I got to be cutting. So I had to center those 2 holes with the original screw holes. So I figured out where center was between each of the screw holes, made my mark for my drill bit, and then I was able to say, okay, well, the speedometer's going here, tachometer's going here, and hopefully the bezel of the gauge itself should cover these screw holes. I got the biggest gauges I could to fit within that itself, and to fit here within the boat. I didn't want to go any bigger because a bigger gauge would have eaten up all the space on this gauge panel. So that's what I was working within. So got everything drilled out, cut, and then I had to actually take away a little bit more with a Dremel, with a sanding bit to kind of get the big gauges where they drop in nice and smooth. It was just a little bit too tight for my comfort, so I just kind of widened them just a little bit more with the Dremel. Worked great, was able to drop those big gauges in. And then I noticed that I could still see just a teensy tiny piece of those original screw holes I was just telling you about. Wasn't happy at all. So I thought about it for the afternoon and I came up with a good idea. And that idea was I can make a ring to go around these gauges and basically make a wider bezel. So basically having a 2-tone bezel. So you have the silver and then whatever color I choose. And the color that I chose to go with was black. I was able to get a sheet of ABS plastic, and then I was going to make that ABS plastic into my gauge rings. So how I did this, first attempt was using my wife's grandfather's drill press. I took my hole saws down there, mounted the plastic to a board, tried to cut through, but every time this drill press was coming down with the hole saw, it was just so slightly, like 1/8 of an inch, getting a little out of level. So it was cutting a little bit heavier on one side. So I almost ruined the plastic trying to cut through. So came back home, decided, okay, well, I was able to actually cut the plastic out, but in order to make it look better, I mounted it to a piece of scrap lumber that I had, cut the outside first, then got the measurements to cut the inside of the gauges and cut the interior of the ring. And then I was left with a perfect size gauge ring for the speedometer and for the tachometer. I also cut one for the voltmeter. Of course, it's a lot smaller, and I made it, slid these gauge rings onto the gauges, dropped them in, and then proceeded to get them mounted. Now, I'm going to do another video about wiring, and when I do the wiring, I want to touch on wiring these gauges. I just wanted to show you the process of getting them ready to drop in. So, with the gauges inserted and ready to be wired up, it's time to look at installing the glass. Again, if you may have noticed already, I had to wait to put the glass in because if I would have installed this prior to putting the gauges in, I would have had a real problem because I wouldn't have been able to drill down at the angle I needed to. So now with the gauges installed, it's time to put the glass in this boat. This was actually put the rails in first on either side of the boat. Then once I had the rails in, I was able to slide the actual glass into both of those rails, and then I went around and installed the supports. Got all the supports buttoned down, and hey, I was able to get both the captain's and passenger sides done. Now, one other thing I was able to do that I didn't have originally with this boat was I sourced the center windshield for this boat. I have been looking for a long time, just kind of keeping an eye open for one to get secondhand off of somebody. And you remember me earlier talking about a guy parting out V-156. Well, that same guy had the glass for this boat. So I bought the center section. He shipped it to me. I believe it was North Carolina, was where it came from. And he even had the original piano hinge on the glass itself. I sized it up, got it where I wanted it, and then I proceeded to drill holes into the passenger glass where that piano hinge would mount. And then once I had those holes drilled, I then used rivets to fasten the glass in place. And lo and behold, now I have a center windshield in this boat. So just one more thing to kind of improve upon with this boat that I didn't have originally. All right, so with the glass installed in this boat, it was time to move on to something more entertaining. Exactly what I'm talking about was, it was time to put the radio into this boat. Ever since I had the speakers installed, it's just been sitting here glaring me in the face that, you know, it'd be really nice to hear those things. So, previous Christmas to when I'm releasing this video, so Christmas 2017 I believe it was, I was given as a gift a JVC marine grade head unit for this boat, and it's just been sitting here collecting dust. So I unboxed it and quickly wired it up to the speaker cables that I had ran before I even dropped this thing off to paint. Now, that was an old video. Y'all can look back. I'll put a link up above here if you want to go back and watch the preparations I made on the cap before taking this boat to paint. So kind of hindsight, I had already done all the groundwork for the audio system. Well, now it was time to use those wires and actually put some power and some sound through the speakers themselves. So got the JVC connected, and quickly all I did was use a battery box to power it. The rest was history. I mean, I'm not going to play what it sounds like because I just believe that hearing something secondhand through a microphone and then to a camera and then playing through speakers on YouTube, you're not really going to get a true representation of how it sounds. But these Rockford Fosgates sound awesome with this JVC. JVC is Bluetooth compatible, came with a little radio. It also has a microphone for your phone, so you can actually use a speakerphone with this head unit if you want to. But primarily all I was concerned about was I wanted something marine grade, and I wanted something that would either do Bluetooth or USB to connect to my iPod / iPhone. So that's why we went with this, and it sounds great. I saw a couple of guys on YouTube who had used something similar, kind of messaged those guys back and decided this was the one I wanted. So that's the one I picked out, and that's what I ended up with. All right, everyone, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video here. Covered a lot of different topics in this video entry, but it was necessary to get us caught up to the next entry, which is going to be all about the wiring. Just a little preview, the wiring originally in this boat was pretty basic, and I'm taking this thing years and decades ahead of where it was originally. So that's just kind of what's in store for next time. So again, thank you to everyone out there who's a new subscriber, who's been a subscriber, anyone who's liked, shared, anything to help me support this channel. I greatly appreciate it. Can't believe where we're at right now at the release of this video here in time. It's pretty awesome, and I'm just really excited about what's to come. So stay tuned. Project Glastron is moving full steam ahead. I have a lot to show you guys and girls out there, so stick around. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing so you don't miss a single thing. As always, my name's Josh. This is the jmink channel, and I'll see you next time.